Coming up on Arirang News, President Moon Jae-in urges Japan to stop its retaliatory trade restrictions on South Korea, warning that it's a game that can have no winner and only hurts both sides. Japan approves the first shipment to Korea of one of the key materials it's restricting. Reports say it's doing that to show that its trade curbs are not a total embargo. And President Trump says the U.S. has gotten South Korea to agree to pay a lot more for the stationing of American troops here. But Seoul's foreign ministry says that in fact negotiations have not yet begun. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to our afternoon broadcast. I'm Devin Whiting. According to President Trump, South Korea and the U.S. are discussing how to share the costs of South Korea's defense next year. And he says Seoul has agreed to pay a lot more for the stationing of American troops. But Seoul says, in fact, those negotiations haven't started yet. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
President Trump says South Korea has agreed to sharply increase its contribution for the shared cost of keeping the roughly 28,000 American troops stationed on the Korean peninsula.
South Korea and I have made a deal where they're paying a lot more money and they're going to pay a lot more money, and the relationship is a very good one. But I felt all along, I felt for years it was a very unfair one. So they've agreed to pay a lot more, and they will agree to pay a lot more than that. And we're with them. We're with them.
Trump tweeted earlier in the day that talks to increase Seoul's contribution had begun. The U.S. leader also said South Korea is a very wealthy nation that now feels obligated to contribute to the defense it receives from the U.S. military. However, shortly after Trump's tweet was posted, Seoul's foreign ministry said negotiations on the special measures agreement, a bilateral deal between South Korea and the U.S. to share the cost of American forces in Korea, have not started. The ministry said that during U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton's visit to Seoul last month, South Korea and the U.S. agreed to proceed with the issue in a rational and fair direction, adding the two sides plan to discuss the finer details in the negotiations. The ministry also said it's working on selecting its next chief negotiator and forming a task force. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
The U.S. government has approved the potential sale of $800 million worth of helicopters to South Korea. The Pentagon's Defense Security Cooperation Agency said Wednesday that it's given the go-ahead for 12 MH-60R multi-mission Seahawk helicopters and the equipment that goes with them. The agency said it expects that sale to support Washington's diplomatic policies and bolster the Korean Navy's anti-submarine and surface missions, as well as secondary missions like search and rescue. Seoul's Defense Procurement Agency said it's looking at several kinds of helicopters, including the Seahawk, and will announce its choice by early next year. North Korea has been firing missile after missile over the past couple of weeks, but this behavior has done little to dampen Washington's enthusiasm for dialogue with the regime. In fact, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Wednesday he's hopeful the two sides will resume their negotiations soon. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Speaking to reporters at the U.S. State Department on Wednesday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he's confident the U.S. and North Korea will resume denuclearization negotiations in the coming weeks.
President Trump's and this administration's strategy with respect to North Korea haven't changed. Our effort is to achieve the full final denuclearization of North Korea. We are hopeful that in the coming weeks we'll get back to the negotiating table to achieve that.
Pompeo's optimism comes despite North Korea conducting 4 short-range ballistic missile tests over the past couple of weeks in protest over ongoing joint military exercises between Seoul and Washington. According to the top U.S. diplomat, as long as the North doesn't test nuclear weapons or ICBMs, the Trump administration is generally content.
We watch the actions that they're taking, the actions that are taking place inside of North Korea. And we are mindful that when we came in, there was nuclear testing taking place. That has not occurred. There aren't long-range missiles being fired. Those are both good things. Now the task is for us to deliver on what the two leaders agreed to back in June of last year in Singapore.
The leaders of North Korea and the U.S. agreed to resume working-level denuclearization talks when they met at the inter-Korean border in June. However, the talks have yet to take place, despite earlier expectations they would restart in mid-July. 이승재, Arirang News.
Japan is planning to release 1 million tons of radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. The international community has strongly criticized Japan for what's being called an irresponsible act. Kim Dami reports.
Global environmental watchdogs have slammed Japan's plan to release 1 million tons of radioactive wastewater into the Pacific Ocean. In an article published by The Economist, Greenpeace nuclear specialist Sean Burney said releasing wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear plant would increase the exposure to radiation in neighboring countries, especially South Korea. He said it will take around 17 years for all the radioactive materials in the wastewater to break down. Burney criticized the Abe administration for neglecting the development of technologies to clean up radioactive materials. He said Tokyo has now given up on providing an explanation and is rather keeping silent on the matter. According to Burney, there's no legal course of action that could stop Japan from releasing the pollutants. Earlier on Tuesday, the Greenpeace office in Seoul called Tokyo's act a crime that threatens not only the ocean near Fukushima, but also countries in Pacific Ocean. Greenpeace Korea urged the Abe administration not to cause this environmental crisis. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Every year, the city of Jecheon, about 2 hours from Seoul, hosts a film festival where all the movies are in some way related to music. And this year's edition is the biggest yet. Our Won Jung-hwan has the details.
The Jecheon International Music and Film Festival has been held every year since 2005 in the city of Jecheon, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, screening outstanding music-based films from dramas and documentaries to animations and experimental films. This year's festival runs from Thursday until August 13th, with Jecheon's beautiful Cheongpungho Lake as a fitting backdrop. And one of the committee members says this time visitors will be able to get closer to the festival than ever before.
This year marks the festival's 15th anniversary, and under the slogan of Into the Citizens, we've prepared some programs to be held in downtown to get even closer to the visitors.
This year's festival is expected to be the largest in the festival's history, with more than 120 films from nearly 40 countries, including Japan, being screened. In fact, as the boycott of Japanese goods and content gains momentum in Korea, a couple of days ago, Jecheon City Council demanded that Japanese titles be removed from this year's lineup. But the organizers of the festival confirmed on Thursday that there is no change from the original schedule and that they will not boycott Japanese films. And besides the screening of the films, the JIMF plans to celebrate Korea's warm midsummer days and nights with a packed program. Visitors can enjoy musical performances on an outdoor stage with some music concerts from renowned performers such as Haze and Hwisong. And besides the dazzling One Summer Night music events for the fans, visitors can have a chance to connect with artists at the JIMF Live Music Talk, where artists and guests will tell stories and explain the reasons behind their work. The Global Music and Film Festival, which is the only one of its kind in Asia, will provide visitors with more than just films, as it has done for the past 15 years. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
President Moon says the trade dispute between South Korea and Japan benefits no one and only hurts both sides. He was speaking at a national economic meeting this morning to draw up measures in response to Japan's trade restrictions. Park Hee-jun has the details.
President Moon Jae-in urged Japan to end this dispute that has no winner. He called on the Japanese government to call off its trade restrictions, which are hurting the economies and people of both countries.
일본이 일방적인 무역 조치로 얻는 이익이 무엇인지 잘 모르겠습니다. 설령 이익이 있다 해도 일시적인 것에 지나지 않습니다. 결국은 일본 자신을 포함한 모두가 피해자가 되는 성자 없는 게임입니다.
President Moon held his third National Economic Advisory Council meeting on Thursday, where he discussed possible countermeasures against Japan's trade restrictions with related senior officials and experts, including as Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Sang-jo and Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi. There, he criticized Japan for its contradictory behavior.
일본은 자유무역 질서의 혜택을 가장 많이 본 나라이고 자국에게 필요할 때는 자유무역주의를 적극 주장해온 나라이므로 이번 일본의 조치는 매우 이율배반적입니다.
The president stressed that when a country weaponizes its strengths, it only disrupts the free trade order. He also said that Tokyo's retaliation against South Korea's Supreme Court ruling on wartime forced labor also violates a fundamental principle of democracy, the separation of powers. He again emphasized the importance of boosting the competitiveness of South Korean companies in regard to parts and materials, while also diversifying the origins of imports. Although the dispute still may not cause actual damage, President Moon raised the need for a response plan that focuses on the economic uncertainties caused by the trade restrictions. On the same day, Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Sang-jo met with the executives of the country's top 5 conglomerates. He gathered the opinions of Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, SK, LG, and Lotte on the unprecedented situation as part of government efforts to work together with businesses to overcome the difficulties. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
And for the first time in the now month-long South Korea-Japan trade dispute, Seoul has confirmed that Japan approved a shipment of one of the key high-tech materials that was subject to stricter regulations. Our Kim Mo-gyun has this report.
On Thursday, Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun announced that Japan approved the export of a key semiconductor material to South Korea for the first time since it tightened export restrictions to Seoul. Speaking at an interagency meeting on state affairs, Prime Minister Lee said that Japan's trade ministry made the approval after concluding that the latest shipment posed no risk to Japan's national security.
On Wednesday, Japan promulgated its decision to remove South Korea from its list of trusted trading partners, but did not expand its restrictions to other items. Japan also approved the shipment of an extreme ultraviolet photoresist, which is one of the 3 items that were affected by Tokyo's trade curbs.
He said that even so, Tokyo's economic restrictions against Seoul are unjustifiable, given that Japan is one of the countries that benefits a lot from free trade. The Prime Minister vowed to get things back to normal through diplomatic efforts. Photoresist is one of the 3 key semiconductor materials that Japan tightened its regulations for exports to South Korea on July 4th. Those tighter regulations make photoresist, fluorinated polyamides, and hydrogen fluoride subject to case-by-case inspections in order to be imported to South Korea. Japanese media also reported on the latest photoresist shipment, hinting that Tokyo's latest approval signals that Japan is not banning trade with South Korea itself. The Sankei Shimbun reported that Japan is permitting exports to Korea once it confirms that there is no security threat, adding that Tokyo's tightening of trade controls on Seoul is not a trade embargo. The Yomiuri Shimbun also highlighted that the permission shows that Tokyo's export curbs are not a trade regulation and that trade will continue with South Korea if no problem has been detected during the review process. However, according to the newspaper, Japan's Trade Minister Hiroshige Seko still warned that their trade controls with Seoul could be expanded if they detect any signs of inappropriateness other than the 3 items announced in July. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance minister Hong Nam-gi has convened a meeting this afternoon to go over possible countermeasures to Japan's new export curbs. It's a closed-door meeting, and they haven't said when the results will be released other than it won't be today. But according to the Trade Ministry, top officials are discussing whether to remove Japan from South Korea's own so-called whitelist of preferential trading partners. And they'll decide on whether or not to change the export regulations for strategic materials headed to Japan. This could mean Japan will no longer benefit from a simplified inspection process. In response to Japan's trade curbs, South Korea's ruling Democratic Party has launched a new committee tasked with finding ways to support local companies making materials, parts, and equipment. Former National Assembly Speaker Chung Se-gyun, who heads the committee, said Thursday that all efforts at the legislative level will be directed at minimizing the fallout on local companies and helping them boost their competitiveness. He called Tokyo's export controls reckless and irrational, saying they threaten the two countries' bilateral trade system and fly in the face of the principles of free trade. Chung added their focus will be finding realistic yet efficient measures by stepping up public and private communication. Meanwhile, the U.S. is calling on South Korea and Japan to find ways between them to repair their ties and make sure that security-wise they stay in close coordination with each other and with Washington. Oh Jung-hee reports.
The U.S. says it'll help to mediate the trade spat between South Korea and Japan, but the two countries need to look for a creative solution to their dispute and ensure three-way coordination remains strong. At a forum in Washington Wednesday about the South Korea-Japan trade row, Mark Napper, the State Department's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Korea and Japan, said the U.S. will continue to stay involved and is always ready to promote communication between Seoul and Tokyo. But he added there needs to be, quote, some soul-searching on recent political decisions that have hurt their trust in each other, and the two are equally responsible for improving ties. He went on to say he believes the two countries will be able to find a creative solution. As ties between Seoul and Tokyo start to worsen after Japan decided to take South Korea off its whitelist of preferential trading partners, Washington continues to stress that the three-way security coordination should be preserved. Seoul is considering terminating its bilateral intelligence sharing agreement with Japan called Jecheon later this month as a countermeasure to Japan's export curbs. Asked whether there's a separate intelligence sharing agreement among South Korea, the U.S., and Japan that can replace Jecheon, the State Department told Voice of America that it's crucial the three countries keep their strong partnership intact so they can face regional challenges, namely North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Koreans have been boycotting travel to Japan, and in the city of Osaka, the tourism industry is reportedly feeling the heat. According to Japan's Kyodo News on Wednesday, the number of South Korean tourists visiting Osaka between June and July was down more than 30% on year. In fact, at least one municipality in Japan is getting ready to give emergency loans to businesses affected by the loss of South Korean tourists. Officials representing Tottori Prefecture have said they will give financial support to companies to help them weather the expected impact. And credit card spending in Japan by South Koreans also plunged in mid to late July. According to industry data, Koreans spent around $82 million on their cards there last month. Now, for all of July, that's a rise of 1.1% from a year earlier, but in the fourth week of July, it was down 5.3%, and in the last few days of the month, a drop of more than 19%. It's time now for an in-depth look at the market action this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Kiwoom Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for making time today.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, Wall Street overnight, no big changes. The Dow slightly down, the rest were slightly up. Looks like a combination of factors like China trade and interest rates. Here in Korea, though, the Kospi breaking a six-session losing streak. What's going on in the markets today and why?
Yes. If you look at the U.S. 10-year bond rate, it continues to fall below 1.7% yesterday. Continuation of the possible rate cut might be happening faster than expected. And in addition to that, you have seen India, Thailand, and New Zealand all cutting rates at the current point in time. So the concern about the renminbi depreciating rapidly, trade war issues continues, but nevertheless, the U.S. market able to recover because of the continuation of rate cuts that's happening on a global scale. So NASDAQ was successfully rising 2 days in a row. And if you look at the NASDAQ was up 0.38%. As for Dow and S&P, it was fairly flat, but nevertheless, it recovered from close to 2% decline at the beginning of the morning. Accordingly, the European market recovered by 0.56%. Nikkei was also up about 0.4%. Shanghai is up about 1% plus. And Kospi was able to recover as well, despite that today was option closing day. And the Kosdaq was sharply risen almost 3% level.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, everybody's saying that the U.S.-China trade war is turning into a currency war. China letting the yuan depreciate significantly this week. Where's the Chinese currency now, and where do you see it going from here?
Yes. The Chinese yuan, the renminbi, hit above 7. The actual announcement by this PBOC was 7.003 or somewhat. So first time in history that it was above 7. The reason, obviously, this is because of the continuation of trade dispute that's happening between U.S. and China. And obviously, U.S. government have said that they will place China as the currency manipulation country. So we need to see how this will play out. If you look at the history of Korea, Korea was announced as the currency manipulation country in 1988. At that time, the average Korean won to dollar rate was about 800 level in the year before. But over the period of 2 years, it appreciated by 14% to below 700 won to dollars. And after that, sharp drop of the surpluses resulted into removal from the manipulation countries. Now, if you look at the trade numbers between U.S. and China, this continuation of the trade growth rate for the export versus import is very high, where Chinese are making a lot more gains on trade surpluses. So because of this, I think that continuation of U.S. And saying that currency manipulation is occurring is getting somewhat of support. So we think that Chinese renminbi can no longer be continued to depreciate as it did, as more international players will be saying that the current rate is too cheap versus the U.S. dollars. Over the next 6 months to 12 months, I do anticipate that renminbi to appreciate versus U.S. dollars after the announcing the currency manipulation country.
Got it. Well, meanwhile, Japan, of course, has been restricting exports to Korea of 3 key materials used in making semiconductors, but now it's approved at least one shipment of one of the materials. What might that decision mean, and what's been the response to that?
Well, obviously, the decision-making by Japanese government, the Abe party, was probably in a too wrongly placed, in a sense, because it is a political issue that turned into economic issues and trade issues. So not many people are supporting this kind of measures that was done by Japan to Korea. Both countries, democratic countries, they should be a partners rather than this kind of dispute should happen. But because of this, the Korean companies are moving very rapidly and aggressively separating from Japan in terms of the part imports. We heard that these major 3 parts related, it might take 5 years to 10 years, but it seems that because of such a strong effort, we think that it could have been shortened, as we have seen since 1985, where dependency of the parts from Japan have significantly declined over the period of 10 years. So at this kind of speed, Korea will probably try to create more of a supply chain that is much more feasible to Korea's operation versus having a supply chain across the border. So I think that this is going to put more pressure on the Abe government, and they might have to come with some kind of agreement with the current boycotting issues and various other issues where Korea is moving rapidly away from Japan.
All right, Mr. Yu, we'll keep watching that issue, but we'll have to leave it there for today. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, Samsung Electronics has revealed its highly anticipated new smartphone, the Galaxy Note 10. That goes on sale in a couple of weeks, and it has some cool new features, as our Lee-Min Sun reports.
Samsung Electronics has unveiled its new Galaxy Note 10 and its 6.8-inch jumbo version, the Note 10 Plus. Nearly 4,000 people attended Samsung's Galaxy Note 10 Unpacked event at the Barclays Center in New York to see the unveiling on Wednesday. The new models are packed with new features, including Air Actions, which can detect gestures like users flicking or swinging the phone's S Pen from afar. Users can customize the S Pen's controls to play games or launch applications using gestures without touching the screen. The Galaxy Note 10 has become a more powerful tool for creators with the integration of augmented reality and 3D technology into the camera. Its 3D scanner feature is a groundbreaking first for the Note series. It can scan an object and turn it into a movable 3D rendering.
Actually now taking AR, so augmented reality, to a new level with the S Pen with AR Doodle. So if you want to send customized images or messages to friends and family, you can take the S Pen and actually draw right on the screen on top of a person or even a place, and it will follow them throughout the picture. So if I wanted to draw some new eyebrows on myself or a hat, I could send that selfie.
The souped-up Note 10 Plus has a 7.5% boost in battery capacity over the Note 9. The Note 10 will retail at $949, while the larger Note 10 Plus will cost you an extra $50 or so. Both models come in 3 colors and they will go on sale worldwide starting August 23rd. 이민선, 아리랑 뉴스.
And that does it for this hour. Thank you for watching.